Today, we're going to unpack one of the most incredible stories of the 20th century. It's all about how the massive, incredibly diverse subcontinent of India managed to forge a single national identity through its long struggle for freedom. We're going to zero in on the 1920s and 30s, because this was a time of just huge, revolutionary change.
So, let's just start with the big question that hangs over this entire story. Seriously, how does a place with so many different languages, religions, and cultures even begin to see itself as one single nation? It seems almost impossible, right? Well, that was the central challenge that defined India's entire independence movement.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at what sparked this new push for unity. Then we'll dive into the game-changing idea of satyagraha. We'll see how that powered the huge non-cooperation movement and then led to the iconic March for Independence. And finally, we'll listen to the many different voices that were all part of creating this new nation. Let's get started.
So where does our story really kick off? Well, it's in the years right after the First World War. Now, you'd think the end of a war would bring some relief, but in India, it was the exact opposite. It created a whole new set of crises that really pushed people to their absolute limits. You see, the British had funded the war with heavy loans and taxes, which meant defense spending doubled. Prices for everything shot through the roof, hitting ordinary people incredibly hard. On top of that, crops were failing, causing massive food shortages. And as if that wasn't enough, a devastating influenza epidemic was sweeping across the country. All this shared hardship created a powerful common anger against colonial rule, and it basically set the stage for everything that was about to happen.
Right at this critical moment, a new leader arrives on the scene, and he's got a completely new vision, a whole new way of thinking about how to fight back. This idea was called satyagraha, and honestly, it was going to change everything.
In January of 1915, Mahatma Gandhi returned to India. He'd been in South Africa, and he brought back with him this powerful, already tested method of protest that would pretty soon just capture the imagination of the entire country.
And that method was satyagraha. Now, it's not just passive resistance. It's actually a very active form of struggle. It's all based on the power of truth and a deep commitment to nonviolence. The core idea is really profound. If your cause is just and true, you don't need violence to fight your oppressor. You can actually win through pure moral strength.
And look, this wasn't just some abstract theory. Gandhi had already put it into practice and had seen it work. He inspired peasants in Champaran, supported them in Kedah, and organized mill workers in Ahmedabad. He was showing people that satyagraha could achieve real, tangible victories.
So the first big nationwide test for satyagraha comes in 1919. It was something called the Rowlatt Act. And this law was just terrible. It gave the British government these immense powers to crush any political activity, including throwing people in jail for up to 2 years without even a trial. It was a direct assault on the most basic of freedoms.
The response, of course, was protests everywhere. But on April 13th, the movement took an absolutely horrific turn. In the city of Amritsar, a British general, General Dyer, ordered his troops to fire on a peaceful, unarmed crowd that had gathered in a place called Jallianwala Bagh. Hundreds of people were killed. This brutal act sent shockwaves of pure horror and anger across India, and it really radicalized the struggle for freedom.
All that outrage over the Rowlatt Act and the massacre, well, it led directly to the next major phase of the struggle, a huge nationwide movement that was built on one simple idea: complete non-cooperation with the British.
So why non-cooperation? Well, the logic that Gandhi laid out was simple, but it was also kind of brilliant. He said that British rule in India could only survive because Indians themselves cooperated with it. You know, they worked in the government, went to British schools, bought British goods. The idea was if Indians just refused to cooperate, the entire British Empire in India would simply collapse.
The goal here was a single word, Swaraj, which means self-rule. And what made this call so powerful was that Swaraj meant something different to everyone. If you were in the urban middle class, it meant boycotting foreign stuff. If you were a peasant, it meant an end to crushing rents and forced labor. And if you were a plantation worker, Swaraj meant the simple, beautiful freedom to just go home.
The movement had this massive momentum, but it was also incredibly volatile. In February 1922, in a place called Chowri Chowra, a protest turned violent, and a police station was attacked. Now for Gandhi, a true believer in nonviolence, this was a breaking point. He called off the entire movement, just like that. He felt the people just weren't ready for a truly disciplined, nonviolent struggle.
So after a few years of quiet, the late 1920s roll around, and there's this new energy bubbling up in the freedom struggle, and it all leads to one of the most brilliant and iconic acts of political protest in all of modern history.
In January 1930, Gandhi does something really bold. He sends a letter to the British Viceroy, Lord Irwin, and in it he lists 11 demands. It was basically an ultimatum. He said, meet these demands by March 11th, or you're going to face a new nationwide campaign of civil disobedience.
And of all those 11 demands, one was just pure genius: abolishing the salt tax. Now, you might be thinking, salt? Why salt? Well, think about it. It's something that every single person in India needed, whether you were rich or poor. By taxing it, the British had created this powerful, universal symbol of their oppression.
When the British ignored the demands, Gandhi launched his legendary Salt March. He started with just 78 trusted volunteers, and they walked for 240 miles over 24 days, all the way to the sea. The whole world was watching, as thousands and thousands of people joined him along the way. Finally, on April 6th, he reached the coast, and he symbolically broke the law by making salt from the seawater. That one simple act of defiance lit a fire across the country. It kicked off the entire civil disobedience movement. People all over India started breaking the salt law, boycotting foreign goods, and refusing to pay taxes. The movement went on for a few years, with cycles of protests and negotiations, but by 1934, it had started to lose steam.
But creating a unified nation wasn't just about fighting the British. There were also these really deep divisions within Indian society. And these divisions were a serious challenge to the whole idea of a single, united India.
One of the most critical debates was about the rights of the Dalits, who were then called untouchables. Gandhi fought for their social integration, even calling them Harijans, or children of God. But Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was a brilliant Dalit leader himself, he argued that social reforms weren't enough. He demanded separate electorates to guarantee that Dalits had real political power, a real voice, and that position led to a major clash between him and Gandhi.
Another huge challenge was the growing rift between Hindus and Muslims. You see, after the non-cooperation movement had briefly brought the two communities together, a lot of Muslims started to feel alienated from the Congress Party. They were worried that in a future India with a Hindu majority, their own culture and identity would get pushed aside. And this growing distance created some really deep and lasting tensions.
And yet, even with all these deep divisions, a powerful sense of collective belonging was still being built, and a lot of this happened through shared symbols. The image of Bharat Mata, or Mother India, gave people a visual idea of the nation. Nationalists started collecting folk songs and legends to create a sense of a shared history, and Gandhi himself designed the Swaraj flag with a spinning wheel right in the center to represent self-reliance. It gave people a banner they could all rally around.
So what was emerging here wasn't a nation with one single uniform voice. It was a nation of many, many different voices who were all demanding freedom. The struggle for independence was also a struggle to figure out how to manage all these internal differences. And that leaves us with one last big question. How does a nation with so many different voices learn to speak as one? That challenge, which was born in the freedom struggle, is something that continues to shape India to this very day.